First graphic tonight, hazardous weather. Still have a winter weather advisory out, St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait coast, as well as the lower Yukon River area on up into the Nulato Hills there, Stebbins, Grayling, and up in toward Galena. And that's out for tonight, especially this evening for continued snow and blowing snow, winds gusting 35 miles an hour. And that'll create lower visibilities, possibly down to less than half a mile at times, and that'll show some big improvement here after midnight. And for satellite imagery, you can see a band of clouds extending from west to east here across the interior, lifting northward, and so snow ending from south to north, kind of a break here coming into Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, as well as the southwest interior areas during the afternoon today ahead of the next system coming up. So conditions that taking the snow with it, and had the snow and blowing snow, and blizzard warnings ended now for the Yukon Delta. But St. Lawrence Island right under that band of clouds, and low center back here over the western Bering Sea there, slowly weakening. Next system coming up from coming up from the southwest up to the northeast here. Some more cold air wraps into that center, and this front having pushed through the panhandle today, you can see moving quite rapidly through and lifting northward there. That brought rain and snow, changing to more showery conditions this afternoon to the southeast coast. A little bit drier conditions here just to the west there. Again, all the way up into southern Alaska. Mostly clear up over the north slope to the Arctic coast there. And you can see the pretty much clear skies up over the Arctic with the sea ice here showing up quite nicely there. And temperatures well below zero north of the Brooks Range today. And moving this one more time, all this moisture streaming northeastward will be coming right on up in southwest flow into southern Alaska and along the North Gulf Coast late tonight. But today, here's that first front coming through that brought about 1 to 2 inches of snow. It's to sit in the valley around the Anchorage area today, lighter amounts down to the south. Dry today with some clearing, Kodiak Island, some sun breaks around the Homer-Seldovia areas as well, with the snow ending over northern Cook Inlet. And then this front coming across the panhandle earlier today, already pushing through, bringing the rain and snow there. Next system pulling up here, we're already increasing the wind, rain and snow for the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutians. And then that main low center still holding back there to the west, we'll see tonight. Doesn't really move much, but continues to weaken. Now continue to send surges of snow and snow showers into the western and then central Aleutians. They move eastward. And then this low tracking northward into western Bristol Bay or over the southeast Bering Sea. That'll bring rain and snow to the Alaska Peninsula. Pretty gusty winds when that low center pulls up north of the peninsula there. Get some pretty good southwest winds, maybe gusting 45 miles an hour with some higher gusts in the exposed areas there. Rain and snow pushes into Kodiak Island, and late tonight some snow will push back into southern Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula, and also up across definitely Bristol Bay later tonight, and maybe into the southern Kuskokwim Valley by morning. Trough up here keeps some light snow showers. You can see conditions improve dramatically here over the Yukon Delta. But still some snow going on, light snow with less wind now, St. Lawrence Island into the Seward Peninsula, Noatak Valley area, or I'm sorry, the Kobuk Valley, western Koyukuk Valley, but amounts pretty light now with that. Just some isolated snow showers lingering over the western Alaska Range, Copper River Basin, maybe up over toward the Yukon River there, northwest of Eagle. Dry for the north slope on out to the Arctic coast, and another weak trough keeps rain and snow showers in the picture for southeast Alaska. Then tomorrow, this front will push northeastward, bring more rain and snow into the panhandle. Winds not too bad, not really a big increase in the winds with this front, at least through tomorrow. Low pressure moves into the southwest interior, so look for a widespread area of snow from the southeastern Yukon Delta across the Kuskokwim Delta, Susitna Valley. Good shot of snow tomorrow down into Bristol Bay, and that'll come up into south central Alaska. Periods of snow, Kenai Peninsula, all the way from Homer on up Anchorage, Palmer, Eagle River areas. Some of that will spill into the Copper River Basin, but staying mostly dry north of the Alaska Range there. Maybe some continuous snow showers, mostly cloudy skies with that trough over the Kobuk Valley there, but pretty dry for the north slope in the Arctic coast, and a wide widespread area of snow and snow showers here over the Bering Sea, with this low starting to drift a little to the north, but slowly weakening, but really not moving a whole lot. And then for Sunday, kind of a new frontal boundary develops along with this low pressure area, kind of some colder air coming down, forming the warm front and a continued south-southwest flow, or producing the warm front here, the cold front back here to the west, and the trough in between the two. So clouds, rain and snow showers, mostly snow showers and snow, maybe some rain and snow showers to the eastern Aleutians, but cold air pretty much stays locked in and keeps snowfall levels down to sea level out to the west there. Much drier conditions, somewhat higher pressure building into the western interior, and that northwest flow off the Alaska Range may clear it out over northern Cook Inlet and actually into the Susitna Valley as well. Matanuska Valley, Kodiak, mostly clear. Dry conditions, Prince William Sound, maybe some sun breaks in the Copper River Basin, and a lot of showers over the southern southeast coast, and maybe just occasional rain and snow up to the north there, and then maybe some snow showers along the Brooks Range on up to the eastern North Slope and out along the Arctic coastal areas for Sunday. And then low temperatures tonight, upper 20s to mid-30s here for the southeast coast, and otherwise down around zero for the Copper River Basin, otherwise teens and 20s east and south of the Alaska Range, near freezing for Kodiak, around 30, Bristol Bay. Highs in the 30s here for the area southern Kuskokwim Valley down to the Bristol Bay, 41 for Kodiak, and lower 30s south central Alaska, upper 30s toward Homer, upper 20s, say in the Susitna Valley, near 20 in the Copper River Basin, and upper 30s, lower 40s for the Panhandle, followed by lows, upper 20s to mid-30s there. Single numbers, Copper River Basin, Kuskokwim Valley, teens and 20s, south central Alaska and Bristol Bay, followed by highs in the upper 20s, lower 30s. Call it 33 for King Salmon, 38 for Kodiak, upper 20s to mid-30s, south central Alaska, lower 20s in the Copper River Basin areas, and 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. Up to the north, lows tonight right around zero in the central interior, definitely below zero, especially north of the Brooks Range, 25 to 40 below there, and still falling below zero for St. Lawrence Island. Highs really not rising too much out here to the west, well below zero for the western Seward Peninsula, and into the teens here through the central interior, Tanana Valley, Fairbanks area, and then followed by lows 0 to 10 below in the central interior, 20 to 40 below for the North Slope, and then followed by highs, again, 5 to maybe 15 here in the central interior, and Brooks Range on out and to the west, below zero for the southwest coast. Lows tonight in the teens, lower 30s for the Pribilofs, lower to mid-30s for the Alaska Peninsula, upper 20s for the central and western Aleutians out here with the colder air, followed by highs, 20 to 25 for the southwest coast, upper 30s, the Alaska Peninsula, lower to mid-30s out here over the Aleutians and the Pribilofs, followed by lows again in the upper 20s, lower 30s out there in the Aleutians for Sunday morning, teens for the southwest coast, and then the highs in the 30s just about everywhere there.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Saturday morning, IFR up here over the northwest interior, IFR across southern Alaska, marginal VFR Cook Inlet, Kamishak-Ketchimak Bays, and some VFR for Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, southeast Bering Sea here, including the Pribilofs, all the way out to Adak, then marginal VFR beyond there. Solid IFR here for the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast areas into northern Prince William Sound. And for the afternoon, becoming marginal VFR, south central Alaska, some VFR over central and southern Cook Inlet, VFR Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, southeastern Bering Sea, and good area of IFR here over the northern Bering, right into the western southwest interior to the Alaska Range, and covering a big area of interior Alaska all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast. Some IFR lingering over the eastern Copper River Basin, northern and eastern Panhandle. For Sunday afternoon, still some IFR eastern southeast coast and marginal VFR elsewhere, becoming marginal for Yakutat, almost into the VFR zone there. Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast, good VFR into Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, down across Kodiak Island, again Alaska Peninsula, and just about all the Aleutians VFR, southern Bering Sea VFR. Some marginal VFR with a band of moisture coming into the Pribilofs, IFR holding over the northern Bering Sea into the Yukon Delta, and also IFR here along the southern Kuskokwim Valley Valley, northeastern Bristol Bay, on up along the western Alaska Range, and then marginal VFR with IFR over the northern interior there, as well as the central interior, with the heaviest IFR over the eastern Arctic coast and North Slope. Passes, Anatuvik, marginal VFR for the day on Saturday. Same forecast for Adigan as well. So Brooks Range looking pretty marginal, all the passes there. And Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR. IFR, a good bet for rainy as well. Windy, kind of go marginal tomorrow. And for Saturday, Isabel, mostly IFR, marginal VFR at other times. And for Mentasta, IFR, again, at times during the day Saturday. Tanita, mostly IFR. Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, IFR as well. And taking a look at the freezing levels here, surface right near the Pribilofs tomorrow morning. Colder air here out to the west coming in from the Sea of Okhotsk across Kamchatka, pulling it down to the surface of Shimianatu to about Kiska. Otherwise, 2,000 feet nudging northward here to the east side of Kodiak Island and in across Prince of Wales Island. And for icing, again, moisture northeast, traveling northeastward here, so the best chance of some moderate rime icing will be across the southeast coast, with a pretty good chance of at least some isolated moderate rime or mixed icing here across all of southern Alaska. And from there, taking a look at the jet stream, again, southwest flow pretty strong here, just south of the Alaska Peninsula, clipping Kodiak Island right into the northern panhandle up to 155 knots, now pushing all that moisture right into the southeast coast, and some of that even into southern Alaska. Much lighter winds up to the north and also back to the west here. And for the 9,000-foot wind flow, looking west-southwest here over the Bering Sea and Aleutian, southeast Bering Sea, west 45 knots there, right into Norton Sound from St. Lawrence Island, and about 50-knot westerlies cutting across the Alaska Peninsula. Strongest winds right over the southern Gulf of Alaska out of the west-southwest at 80 knots, and then westerlies 65 to 70 knots in over the central panhandle area there, with upper-level low making for lighter wind conditions here over the interior areas of southern Alaska. Pretty light over the eastern interior as well as the western Brooks Range and the Arctic coast. Not too bad. 3,000 feet, pretty light wind flow over much of mainland Alaska all the way down to the North Gulf Coast. South side of this low, though, west-northwest, 55 knots blowing across the Aleutian Range there from Bristol Bay and across southern Kodiak Island. Turning southwest, really diminishing here. As you can see, it reaches the coast and then just stops almost into the panhandle. 45 knots, though, across Montague Island. And out to the west, 40 to 55 knot westerlies across the Bering, southern Bering and the Aleutians. And for turbulence, expect moderate turbulence at some point in the day tomorrow for much of the Aleutians, right on up into the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, western Alaska Range, North Gulf Coast, and all the panhandle. Pretty smooth on up to the north. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen and actually collapse, we're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles in nests to respond to conservation measures. But threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected. The nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the U.S., we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
we're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there. And that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Okay, marine forecast. Southwest winds 20 to 25 knots here for the south coast. Small craft advisory, south winds 25 knots north coast, and lighter winds over the northern inner channel, southerlies at about 15 knots. Bump it up to south at 20 knots there for Stevens Passage, and then back down to south at 15 for Clarence Strait. And for Sunday, we've got west winds 20 to 25 knots there on the south coast, west 25 on the north coast, and central and northern inner channels winds mostly south at 15 knots, so 3-foot seas. Clarence Strait, northwest winds 15 knots, seas 3 feet. And for Prince William Sound, small craft advisories for the day Saturday. East winds 25 knots there with 5-foot seas. Gale warnings for the North Gulf Coast. East to southeast winds at 35 knots. Barren Islands gale warnings. Southwest winds at 40 knots. East winds 30 knots for Kamishak Bay. And Cook Inlet, northeast winds 20 to 25 knots. For the day Sunday, light variable winds, northern Cook Inlet, and otherwise southern Cook Inlet, west at 20, 30-knot westerlies for Kamishak Bay. Gale warnings for the Barren Islands and western North Gulf Coast. There, west winds 35 knots. Eastern North Gulf Coast, northwest at 30 knots, and Prince William Sound, northwest winds 15 knots, seas 2 feet. Kodiak Island, gale warnings for the day Saturday. Southwest winds 40 knots. Good gales here for the Alaska Peninsula. Southwest 45 with higher gusts. South 45 with storm force winds to 55 knots for Bristol Bay. And then for Sunday, west-southwest winds 20 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay winds down to 20 knots from the southwest. Kodiak Island small craft advisories. West winds 25 to 30 knots. Seas as high as 13 feet. And for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, gale warnings for Unalaska Island, west winds and southwest winds of 40 knots. Otherwise, Unmac Island, Adak and Atka, and Amchitka, all southwest at 30 knots. For the day Saturday, seas up to 17 feet. And small craft advisories, western Aleutians, west-southwesterlies, 25 to 30 knots. On Sunday, those become south to southeast at 30 knots there for the western Aleutians, Adak and Atka, south winds 25 knots. Same thing for Unmac Island. Unalaska Island, wind southwest 20 to 25 knots. And then for the southwest coast, Saturday, light and variable winds for the Yukon Delta coast, but still northwest at 30 knots for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, north 30 knots for St. Lawrence Island. Pribilofs, westerlies, 15 knots, seas 9 feet. St. Matthew Island, northeast at 15 knots with 8-foot seas. And Norton Sound, north winds at about 15 knots. And for Sunday, Pribilof Islands, southwest winds 25 knots, seas build at 10 feet. Southwest 20 knots here for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, Yukon Delta coast, south winds at 15 knots, and southeast winds 20 knots there for St. Matthew Island. And for St. Lawrence Island, small or brisk wind advisories there, northeast winds 25 knots, light easterlies for Norton Sound. Up along the Arctic coast here, east side, we'll start east winds 20 to 25 knots, strongest over toward Barter Island to Demarcation Point. Central coast, east winds at 15 knots, western Arctic coast north at 15 knots, and from Cape Beaufort to Wales, north winds at 25 knots. And for the day on Sunday, loose and brisk wind advisories here from Wales to Cape Beaufort, down to 20 knots now from the north, north at 20 for the western Arctic coast. Light north winds for the central Arctic coast, and variable winds from a southerly direction on average for the eastern Arctic coast, about 10 to 15 knots. And for tonight, more rain and snow moving in across the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, mostly snow, moving into the southern Kuskokwim Delta, across Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula late tonight, mostly the southern areas there. After a break here, lifts northward, and some snow with this trough over the northwest part of the state. Lots of breezy winds and snow showers for the Aleutian southern Bering Sea, snow and rain showers for the Panhandle, and then that starts to increase more of a steady precipitation pattern late in the day for the southeast coast. Periods of snow across southern Alaska, especially here west of the Alaska Range into Bristol Bay, but pretty dry to the north with some scattered snow showers with that trough. And out to the west, not much change really through Sunday, maybe a little drier here for Adak and Atka. Alaska Peninsula looking good, more clearing, dry conditions, some sunshine in areas of, well, just about all of interior Alaska from the western Arctic coast to the North Gulf Coast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.